Welcome, faculty, students, and guests. I am honored today to speak on behalf of the class of 2022. In the novel Looking for Alaska by John Green, the main character, Miles Halter, goes to boarding school in Alabama in search of what he calls the Great Perhaps. Miles doesn't exactly know what the Great Perhaps is, but believes that boarding school is the place to find it. I read this book the summer before our freshman year, and I too realized that I was searching for something to pull me into my Great Perhaps, like I'm sure many of you were too. After a pretty disastrous freshman year that included embarrassing Battle of the Dorm skits, getting yelled at for walking on the paths, awkward side parts, and living away from home for the first time, I was thinking that maybe this Great Perhaps would not be here after all. I mean, how are you supposed to find greatness when you have a 10:30 bedtime? Still, I went into sophomore year with a positive attitude and an excitement that I don't think I'd ever felt for school before. New classmates joined us, and we continued to become even closer as a class. The most memorable example of this was during a rafting trip to the Shenandoah River one Saturday as part of class bonding. It hadn't rained in a couple days, so the current was weak and the water was shallow. What we had expected to be a nice 2-hour whitewater rafting trip turned into a 4-hour lazy river ride. Every time we would float into another group of Foxcroft people, we would moan and groan about how long and boring it was and tell each other stories of absurdity from the river, like how Dr. O'Connor got hit on, or how Caroline lost her shorts only to have them wash up on shore a mile later. This was the first of many required events that we would bond over as a class. Things like this tied our class together. Our class took everything in stride and turned our miseries into funny memories. Then, that same year, we went home for spring break and didn't come back. I mourned the cancellation of the Woodbury Mixer and thought for sure that we'd completely lost our chances at a Great Perhaps. But we persevered. We did online classes to finish out the year, and thankfully were able to come back to campus for our junior year. After what felt like years away from friends and Foxcroft, I was ready to come back. What followed was a year filled with what can only be described as chaos. Everything that we'd finally come to settle into at school had been changed. Meals, sports, banquets, sing-sings, even classes had changed. Even worse, our class was isolated from each other and from the rest of the school. We were fractured, living in different dorms, unable to visit each other, and even in the classroom, sitting in chairs 6 feet apart. Last year, though, after baccalaureate, us juniors, now seniors, ran to the senior porch. As I was running, I looked around to see all of my classmates in tow. We were ending junior year right where we started, together. We sat around those tables for what felt like hours, laughing and talking, making up for a year's worth of isolation. We discovered that these connections that we had started to form before the pandemic were still there. Senior year was where it all came together, finally. After the past year of craziness, we were finally seniors, and college applications, leadership responsibilities, concentration deadlines, and required events could not stop us from enjoying it. I felt like the Great Perhaps was finally in reach. In the early days of the school year, the class was again forced to go on another class bonding trip. This time, though, we went to Camp High Roads, a ropes course. After tons of complaining to our class advisors about how badly we did not want to go on this trip, we gave up and got on the bus. When we got to Camp High Roads, we all ran off, anxious to get the ropes course over with. But once we got over the usual moodiness of being forced to wake up early on a Saturday, we started having fun. The best part of the trip was this giant swing. One person would be attached to the swing end, and the rest of us would run with the end of the rope and then let it go, essentially letting the person free fall. As I fell towards the ground and felt my stomach drop, I knew this was my Great Perhaps. I had friends all around me, lifting me up and cheering me on as I screamed. Every person in the class got a chance to go on the swing, which meant a lot of rope pulling and running for everyone. Even though we were all sweaty and tired, we rushed to lift each of our people up. That's how I will always remember my time at Foxcroft and our class. Rushing to help each other and lift each other up. Sorry. Our class is so special, and our experiences have been unique. As the only current class to experience a non-COVID year, we had a lot of expectations for what our time at Foxcroft would be like. And even though it didn't turn out how we expected, we made it work. We lifted each other up and guided the underclassmen through this past year. It's been hard, but we can walk away from our time at Foxcroft knowing that we have found at least a part of the great perhaps. Meaningful human connections and a love of learning will follow each of us as we leave the school. I know that no matter how many years passed or how many more pandemics we may have to endure, we can always come back to this place and come together just as we have during our time at Foxcroft. What brings me comfort is the knowledge that we will always have a life in Old Virginia and country roads leading us back.